and welcome to Leader Exchange. So glad you've joined us today. We got a great luncheon plan today with a special guest, Brad McCoy. Brad, thank you so much for being here with us at Leader Exchange and driving in from Abilene this morning. So great to have you.
It's great to be here. Got to see a really good sunrise, right in the face.
Did y'all leave that early?
We did. We left about
great.
we left about 7:15 this morning. So it was good. Beautiful drive, beautiful day. Honored. Thank you guys.
Yeah.
This is a special group of people that you have got assembled here, and
It's
I'm just
been a lot
honored.
of fun.
Yeah, honored to be able to come speak to you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, I told you before we got on the film here that I'm most impressed with you raising three boys that, man, looks like they're doing extremely well. Parenting's not for sissies, for sure. And so done a great job with raising three boys. You have gone to 4 high school state championship, won 2 of those. You've been successful in so many ways, married to your wife, Deborah. 30 years? How long have y'all been married?
It's been 41 now.
41, okay.
Yeah.
You're beating us. So fantastic. So in so many ways, you're living out what we're talking about here at Leader Exchange, and that leadership's not just about your career, but you've also had a great career as well. So one thing that you want to do as what you have done as a coach and in all your careers is develop young men for the future. And so I want to read a quote. He said, "I want our guys to grow up, develop into fine players on the field, of course, but more importantly, I want them to turn into great husbands, dads, business leaders, church leaders, and men that make a difference in the world." Tell us a little bit about how you did that practically.
Well, again, thank you. We've been very blessed.
Yeah.
Deborah and I have been very blessed. Our boys have done well. And they grew up well. Not to say that they weren't in trouble and didn't do things like everybody, all the other kids do too.
Sure.
But we're very blessed the way that they turned out. I coached for almost 30 years and was fortunate to have some really good teams. And that wasn't the end. And
Right.
my biggest joy, I guess, right now in my age is when those kids come back and bring their son.
Yeah.
And coach, this is my son.
That's awesome.
And you see the successes of these young men that you coached 20 years ago
Right.
that have married and made careers and got kids and following Jesus, and
Right.
those are the things that are at my age that are the rewards.
It's so funny. I'm 56. If I were to see my college coach, I'd still call him coach.
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter how old they are; they're still coach. And
Such a respectful name. I
It
do
is.
the same. I still have kids call me coach all the time. Men now, and I tell them that's the most respectful name that you could call me.
Yeah, that's great. Well, that is right in line with our leader exchange model that we talk about. Is that having God at the center, but then those other roles that you have. Leaning on the Lord for those things, and then excelling in all of those areas, not just one of those areas, which it's easy sometimes to try to excel in your career while leaving a marriage or parenting or those other things behind. And so you're trying to develop the whole man and leader. So how do you prepare your players for life after sports? Because, 16, 17 years old, football is all it's what's on your mind, and you can't see beyond that when in reality, it's a very short part of your life.
Yeah. You mentioned your core principles there a while ago, and obviously those core principles are successful in all walks of life. And even when you're coaching kids in high school, they may not have those cores. They might have been presented those cores from their own family.
Right.
I wanted to do that through athletics and show kids how we can be successful. We can work hard. We can do something that everybody wants to see and everybody wants to do, but we still do it the right way.
Right.
And so that was our message with kids. We did a lot of things outside the field. We did a lot of gathering and talking about leadership and principles. And we didn't always have the best kids. We didn't always have the best athletes, but our teams competed hard and won. And some of that is just because of those principles of, it's not, you're always going to have the best. You're always going to be the best, but you can give your best. Right. And so those things carry over when you talk about how does that carry kids in a later life? Well, athletics is hard. It is. It's painful at times.
It is.
And if you can walk them through that, and then it gets them ready for those painful, stressful things that are going to happen in life that do to all of us, in marriage and raising kids and getting fired from a job, and trying to find the next one. All those things, sports can encapsulate that, and coaches can make that happen if they do it the right way.
And most coaches, or a lot of coaches, have a short-term thought: just get me through this year, be successful this year. But if you don't take the long term, you can get burned out as a coach, right? Because it's just about that next game or that one season, as opposed to, hey, I'm in this for the long haul. Yeah. And you had a great run, man. Four state appearances and 2 titles. That's pretty impressive.
It was phenomenal, and we love it. I had a couple of years that weren't so good too.
No, I'm sure.
But you live for those moments. You live for those times that are on time, because you can't win all the time, and sometimes the game's going to be over. And what have you given your kids when they have to hang their cleats up, and live the rest of their life? What have you given them to be able to do that? I got a letter from a kid that I coached years ago, and he wasn't a great athlete. He was just an old kid that was on one of our teams. And I got a letter in the mail that says, "Coach, I'm coming home from Afghanistan.
Wow.
And I'm not in a box."
Yeah. I mean,
and he went on to say, I learned teamwork in high school that saved my life over here.
That's amazing.
And so those are the things as a coach, you live for those pieces to know, hey, you made a difference somewhere. You helped make a difference in a kid.
That's great. Tell us a little bit, that's carried over with the flipping group, where you are going into schools and working with coaches and so forth. Tell us a little bit about your work with the flipping group. Yeah.
So years ago, one of my early jobs, I had a superintendent that wanted to send us to a leadership development type training. Okay. It happened to be Mr. Flippin and the flipping group, Capturing Kids' Hearts. And
so it's named after I didn't realize that. Okay, a last name.
Yeah. He's the CEO of our company, and he's an Aggie, but we can be okay with that, right?
Okay, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
So our corporate offices are in College Station, but no, it's just the principles. When I went through this, the principles that they were trying to teach with teachers and coaches, and were principles that I thought were very biblically aligned. How do you treat people? What are the behaviors that you treat people with? And so it was very early on. We made friends, and I told him I wanted to coach, but there was a time, in fact, the last state championship we played for, my youngest son, Case, was a senior. We got beat by Carthage in the 4A state championship when I was at Graham. And he called me and said, "Hey, come help. We want to build a sports program in what we're doing, and we want to work with coaches." So I came on with him to do that and build this professional development for coaching staffs, and it blew up really fast. And so we're just trying to teach coaches, the model. It's all about high performance. We'll talk about that today, but how do we bring out high performance in our people, whether it's an athlete or our kids or how we lead people in our corporations? So there's basic principles, behavioral metrics that we can talk about that are going to bring out the highest performance.
And you're getting to pass on to those coaches, hey, look at this for the long term. Kind of your own thing is, hey, you're developing men, not just developing players on the field. So that you're duplicating yourself, or hopefully more than that.
It is, and
cloning yourself.
My mom told me a long time ago as a little kid, if you can't preach Jesus in whatever job you're doing, you don't need to be doing that job. Yeah. And so when you look at the stats, I tell coaches, 0.7 kids that you coach are ever going to make money professionally playing what you coach them. Yeah. 100% of those kids are going to stand before Jesus.
Exactly. Yeah. That's great. Well, speaking of that, one of our leader exchange model in the middle is a relationship with God through the person and work of Jesus Christ. How have you practically weaved in your faith into your leadership as a coach and as an athletic director and as a teacher, and now with the flipping group?
Well, Deborah and I had a little motto, a family motto when we were growing up with our own 3 kids. And the basic motto, and I don't know if we heard it and made it up, I adapted it, but the motto was prepare the child for the path, not the path for the child. Right. And I started looking at, I can coach that. Because I was getting as an athletic director, you get parents in all the time. And they were coming in, with their, their pickaxe and shovel, and they were trying to prepare prepare the path, get all the rocky, out. But I started looking at, when they weren't there to prepare it and a kid gets in trouble and falls off the path, they're going to blame education. They're going to blame coaches, blame teachers. So why not prepare the kids for anything that could possibly be in their path? That's kind of the path we took with our own sons. And then I started saying, why don't we coach like that too?
Right.
Because once these kids are gone, or even in the middle of a game, you don't know what's going to change.
Right.
Be ready for the change.
Right.
And so that was one of the major things that we tried to do with our own kids. And my kids
did all right. You did all right.
Well, thanks.
Yeah.
And they'll tell you, they've heard me say that, and they've told other people, my dad used to throw rocks in our path. Just
just to mess up the path a little bit.
Just so we
well,
know
to
that.
be ready, though, I mean, and it is true. I think that's the accusation, potentially. I don't know if it's always true, but from one generation to the next, and maybe we've done too much of preparing the path, and making everything smooth and ready for them, rather than saying, hey, there's going to be hard knocks out there and you need to be ready for it.
Yeah. So when you're talking about athletics, there's always going to be that. There's always going to be a difference. There's always going to be a better team. But then when you move that into life skills,
right?
There's think of the hardships.
Yeah.
Trying to find the right person to marry, the marriages that break up, the kids that you're having to raise and it may not be going right, or the problems in your job, or getting a promotion. I mean, it's just, you have to be prepared for anything that comes, because you never know what's going to come.
Exactly.
So I think that was one of the concepts that we used with our own boys, and certainly in our coaching with kids all those years.
That's great. Well, you coached your boys. That had to be, how was it being a coach and being dad, and taking one hat off and putting the other hat on? How'd you navigate that?
Well, I was blessed because all three of my kids were really good athletically, so that helps.
And there was no disputing whether they should be starting or vice versa.
There really wasn't. And by the way, they made me a really good coach.
Exactly.
But we had a very good relationship. And I told them, I said, one of the deficits of most coaches that coach their own kids is, the outside sources, the other parents, people looking in at the program, think that they get it easier.
Sure.
And so I told my kids early on, I'm going to be harder on you.
That's the throwing rocks in the path, right?
I'm going to be harder on you. When you make a mistake, I'm going to make a big deal, because I want your kids on your team, and I want their parents to know I'm never going to give you anything.
Yeah.
And I said, so at night at the supper table, if you want to ask, you ask. And Dad, was I really that bad today?
Yeah.
And a lot of times I say, nope, you weren't that bad at all, but it was a good opportunity for me to
ride your tail. Yeah, that's right.
And then I had a good wife she would finally say, okay, enough of that.
Yeah.
Football's over. Let's talk about something else. So she was a pretty good barometer.
Did you have to kind of intentionally kind of set it down when you came home, or was there kind of
no, we brought it home, and Colt was obviously loved to watch film, and we did a lot of things to prepare, for his future. But Deborah was the one that was kind of like, it's okay, that's all. It's enough. We're going to do something else.
I'm a little biased. I played football as well, but I think football, in terms of team sport, has got to be one of the best in terms of learning not only the game, but also how to depend on other people. There's just so many dynamics to it. So
there really is. And I think the same. Now, I coached everything coming up. I was a girls basketball coach. Had a lot of success there for a while. And track and field is a tough sport too, because it's individual. You're having to do it by yourself, and you're in that lane all by yourself. So there's a lot of aspects of different sports that we see. But football is the one that combines all those things.
Yeah.
And almost every play you're going to get hit.
Yeah.
And it hurts.
Yeah.
How do you get up and go do that again? And it's just like life.
If the individual sport, you can't hide. I mean,
That's
it's you or not.
That's right. That's right.
If you're a lineman, sometimes not everybody knows what's going on. Now on Monday, they know what's going on when they run that film back. They know what's going on. Well, how about leaders that you have served under, maybe leaders that you have observed and said, hey, I took some things from this person, male or female. What are some leaders that you have grown up admiring? Yeah,
I had some great coaches. In my high school career, I had a couple of really good coaches that were coached in the way I want to coach. But I also had a couple of coaches that weren't.
Yeah, good bad examples.
Yeah,
right?
and to be honest, my coaching style really came more from coaches that I didn't want to be like.
Okay.
And I think
meaning pushing away from that, or you had to overcome that.
Just as I developed, wanting to develop in a certain direction of how I thought coaches treated me, that brought the most out of my abilities, and the ones that pushed the wrong ways.
Yeah.
And it almost was like subservient.
Yeah.
I had coaches that they wanted to serve me.
Yeah.
and I had coaches, they wanted me to serve them.
Well,
and so why do you coach? What are you here for? So I learned a lot from that. And then as I went through college, and I've been coaching for a long time, I've been fortunate to be around a lot of great coaches in a career. You know, obviously my kids play for Mike Brown, and one of the best men in the profession. He just did a great job. And of course, I've been around a lot of other coaches in the college world and the high school world here in Texas with some of the great teaching coaches that believe about how we should coach kids.
Yeah, and you bring up servant leadership, and that's one of our mottos, so to speak, here at Leader Exchange. In terms of, it's not just something you read in a book. It works. Now, it doesn't always work overnight or in a month or two, but over time, when your attitude is, how can I help other people be better, even better than you, or out. I mean, you've kind of done that with your boys. I mean, they're doing things that you probably never imagined they would do, but you serve them to make them great, right? Tell us a little bit about that in terms of how you did that, or how you came to that conclusion about servant leadership.
Well, I mean, of course, a lot of that was bred into me by my parents.
Right.
My parents were very spiritual minded and very relational in what they did. And so I was taught that at a pretty early age.
Right.
And I had times in my life where, tide went against that.
Sure.
You had to, you pull that, which culture you're going to be involved with.
Yeah.
I played in college, and, a lot of that is, I need to get what I need. What do you do?
Yeah.
So a lot of that, you was early on, I was taught that. And that's probably one of the reasons I was so intentional about that in my coaching, because I coached, half or 3/4 of kids that I coached didn't get that at home.
Right.
They were from places they just didn't get that at all, or maybe they didn't have a dad.
Right.
And I became that surrogate. Not just me, but the coaches that were around me. And I was very careful for 30 years about putting the right kind of coaches with me.
Sure.
They obviously knew the game and could coach, but their beliefs, their thoughts, how they treated kids were very in line with mine, because I didn't want to have to worry about how a kid was going to be treated over here. And I was very lucky to have a great group of men and ladies that worked with me for 30 years. That's
great. Well, I've been in the ministry for over 30 years, and I say that coaches have the greatest pastors. They call them coaches, but they really can be pastors in a way that a pastor can't be a pastor to young men and women, of course. And so, way to go for using that platform. When we talk about servant leadership, it ultimately goes back to Scripture, because Jesus is the ultimate servant leader. Servant leadership is not, it's talked outside of biblical principles, but ultimately you got to go back to see the greatest servant leader of all time.
Right,
and I just tell people, hey, even if you don't believe in Christ, you ought to study his leadership, just to go, hey, he started and has continued this worldwide, movement, if you want to call it that, that ought to be respected, if nothing else, right? That 2,000 years later, millions and millions and millions of people have adopted his leadership style, because, again, we know he was the Son of God, the God-man. But even if you don't believe that, it ought to be something you examine. So you got that early from your parents, and then was affirmed through just the other things you've done. So
I did. Like I say, everybody hits those snags in life, and I did, and my boys did, and we all do. But it's that foundation, that groundedness that gets you through that. Like you said, Jesus is that ultimate example.
Right.
None of us can match that.
No.
And we thank God for the grace of that as well. But that's a fundamental piece that you and I, fortunately, got growing up some, but we also understand, and when you're working in the public sector, whether I'm coaching kids, whether it's a CEO that's got a team, or a teacher in a classroom, we know that there are going to be a majority of those kids that may not have that growing up. And so I think that's our call. How do I wanted to win more than anybody. I'm going to try to beat you every time we line up and we play marbles.
Right.
But
you and your wife, are y'all competitive?
Oh yeah. So
she looked like she might be able to take you on some things.
She was a really good college basketball player
That's what I
herself.
heard.
So
that's what brought her to Texas, right?
That's it. That's it.
That's
it. So they're just basic foundational principles that we all use, and they come in handy when times get tough.
Right. In terms of servant leadership, is that something you guys teach at the Flipping Group, or is that a part of what you do? Tell us a little bit about. You've told us a little bit about the Flipping Group. That when you go in, do you actually have a curriculum? Some is it a coursework? Just the nuts and bolts of that a little bit.
Yeah. So the Flipping Group itself is made up of three components. We have a corporate team, we have an educational team, and we have a sports-based team.
Okay.
So our corporate team works with companies all over the world. Being promoting high performance, how do you build things? We have a behavioral model that we really work on. In other words, your leadership is based on your behavior and how you treat people.
Okay.
And so you can't change your personality, who you are, but you can change the behavior that comes out of that personality. And so how we bring people to highest performance. We have a great educational team. We work with, thousands and thousands of schools all over the country in a teacher model. And a leadership model from the superintendent to principal, just about how do you build the right kind of culture, and that's needed more today than any other times. How do we? I tell people all the time, kids haven't changed. Kids have really changed. No, they haven't. Yeah, kids are the same. The culture around them has significantly changed. So how do we keep searching for new curriculum to match a struggling culture, instead of helping the culture so it fits the curriculum. So that's the capturing kids' hearts piece. I'm kind of the athletic director of the Flipping Group, and we have clients in the NFL, Major League Baseball, all college across the country. I love our high school work because that's where we're actually getting to change kids. We're getting them at those formidable ages, and we're not dealing with kids, we're dealing with coaches. What's the behavior of coaches to bring out these things in kids? And so I never thought I'd be doing it as long as I have, but it's allowing me to try to have an impact on coaches all over the country, where and I miss that day in, day out with the staff, with the team. But I'm traveling all over the country now, getting to work with, probably work with 4,000 to 5,000 coaches this year.
That's amazing. You can change in one school. You've been successful there. Now you're kind of multiplying yourself and being helping others be successful and changing, hopefully, some of the culture in our nation. We need that in a big way.
That's what we hope. That's what we hope.
Well, thanks so much for being with us today. Just honored to have you, and we'll look forward to hearing you here in just a few minutes.
Looking forward to it. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for being with us. The Leader Exchange podcast. Come join us second Thursday of each month, 4 in the spring and 4 in the fall. Today we'll have Brad McCoy.